So here's a weird story out of Alabama, a mysterious robocall claiming to be from a Washington Post reporter.
Hi, this is Lenny Bernstein. I'm a reporter for the Washington Post, calling to find out if anyone at this address is a female between the ages of 54 to 57 years old, willing to make damaging remarks about candidate Roy Moore for a reward of between $5,000 to $7,000. We will not be fully investigating these claims. However, we will need a written report.
The call is fake, as you could probably tell by the accent that fluctuates between an anti-Semitic stereotype and some weird kind of Boston amalgam. Washington Post executive editor Marty Barron confirmed it is fake, adding the call's description of our reporting methods bears no relationship to reality. We are shocked and appalled that anyone would stoop to this level to discredit real journalism. Despite apparent efforts like that robocall to discredit the allegations against Roy Moore, Republicans continue to back away, at least at the national level. Politico reporting tonight, the Republican National Committee has pulled out of its fundraising pack with Moore. Haley Byrd is a congressional reporter for Independent Journal Review. Lonnie Chen, former advisor to Senator Marco Rubio's presidential campaign. Lonnie, I'll start with you. It seems to me there's a consensus forming largely on Capitol Hill among national Republicans, at least in the Senate, not Mo Brooks, seen running down the stairs there, to distance themselves from Moore. But the question then becomes, then what?
Yeah, well, Chris, I think that is the big question. I mean, at this point, I think the strategy, certainly amongst Republican leaders, is to figure out, can there be any alternative? Is there anybody else that folks can vote for? You know, the challenges you have, though, is, first of all, the idea of a write-in candidate. Very difficult for write-ins to win unless they already have universal name identification. And then there's really not a whole lot else the governor could do. She could push the election date, but that's going to create all sorts of political problems. So really, they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. For a lot of Republicans, though, Chris, this is very reminiscent of the 2016 presidential election. You had a lot of people who didn't want to vote for Donald Trump, who had to figure out what they were going to do. You're in a very similar situation now for the voters of Alabama.
Well, and Haley, I mean, you saw Mo Brooks, who's a member of Congress you've reported on. We should say, new Alabama pollout has Moore up 6 points even after the first revelations, so not after that Monday allegation of sexual assault. And there's to Lonnie's point, there's probably got to be some calculation on Capitol Hill, like, this guy might just pull it out and bull through the way the president did.
The people I talked to, before sitting down with you tonight, actually, still seem sort of convinced that Roy Moore is either going to drop out, maybe reconsider, or Republicans on Capitol Hill could pressure him enough to drop out. But at this point, it doesn't look like he's going to do that. And there are others who, truly believe that he's not going to win after this. But their record of predicting who's going to win after scandals like this isn't that good after 2016, like you said. So, the question does remain, what are they going to do if he does win? And I don't think Republicans have an answer to that yet.
They seem to be working on. Let me follow up on that, Haley. You're saying that people you talked to on Capitol Hill still retaining hope that they can get him to actually bow out?
Yes. And just a quick trip through Roy Moore's Twitter feed will show you, like, he is, Mitch McConnell says Roy Moore should step aside, and Roy Moore says Mitch McConnell should step aside.
Exactly.
So he's using this, like, anti-establishment campaign rhetoric that Republicans have used themselves for years to sort of push back against something that most Republicans on Capitol Hill agree is not normal behavior after that Washington Post report. So it's interesting to see that dichotomy of that campaign rhetoric, which pretty much all Republicans use in this interesting circumstance.
I think that's, I got to say, Alani, anyone that thinks that Roy Moore is going to be forced out is wishful thinking. They are going to, it seems to me the Republican Party ends up with two possibilities. Number one, a Democrat wins a seat. Doug Jones is the Democratic opponent, wins a Senate seat in one of the most Republican states in the union. You have a sort of reverse Scott Brown effect that reverberates and freaks everyone out. Number two, Roy Moore is the Republican senator from Alabama with possibly more credible accusations to come about his conduct, and every question of all their colleagues all the time is about, what are you doing about Roy Moore? Aren't those the two scenarios?
Yeah, neither scenario is particularly good. The one thing I will say, Chris, is I do think there is one person that has the potential to force Roy Moore from this race, and that's Donald Trump. If the President of the United States were to weigh in and to say, look, I'm not supporting this guy anymore, it's not going to happen, that is something that could change the calculus, but so far there's no indication that's going to happen. Republicans don't have a whole lot of good options. The idea of not seating Roy Moore, by the way, is much more complicated than people realize, because there has to be some form of due process pass according to Senate rules for that to happen. So the options are very, very limited at this point.
Also, Roy Moore's going to fight it. Haley, what do you think about that? I mean, it is very notable that everyone seems to come to their conclusions about the credibility of these allegations and the fitness of Roy Moore, except the man at the top, the president of the United States, who does have internet and cable news access even while on his trip, but who is now landing in the U.S., and it's going to be very hard for him to avoid this.
And I think you should be expecting maybe the president will address this in some way, shape, or form. And I'm sure Republicans are waiting for him to make some sort of statement. But, you know, you do have to think that Republicans are concerned about losing that seat. And if they do, the margin for, like, disagreement in the Republican conference in the Senate right now is so slim. It's only 2 votes. And so if you lose that seat, it is like this constant pressure for Republicans right now to think about losing Alabama, especially when you're trying to push tax reform, all kinds of other stuff, too.
That's why you got Mo Brooks running down the stairs basically saying, I will take the accused child molester, the man accused by a tearful woman of attempting to rape her. I will take him over the Democrats because I don't like the Democratic Party. Haley Byrd and Lonnie Chen, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Ahead, the vice president caught